Hi everyone, welcome back. I know it's been a wee while. I've had a little bit of a distraction in my life lately. I guess we all have with the COVID thing. But I've actually been teaching Ableton lately, so I've just had to spend the last month or so actually cramming learning Ableton live in order to teach it. But it's been quite interesting because in doing that I've also learned a lot about how the new features of Logic work, which basically have been borrowed from Ableton. And that's the live loop features. If you haven't had a play with those yet, and especially if you're into composing music in Logic, especially, I guess, electronic music, but it can be almost anything because, I mean, you can just be sketching out ideas and then fill it in with kind of band stuff later on, or, you know, real instruments. But if you go into, I'm just going to go into, where are we? Let's go new from template. If you haven't checked it out yet, don't save. Okay, so what we're just going to look at here is the starter grids. So if you just kind of pick one of these, I've already kind of loaded all these in, so, you know, you can probably do the same. They do take up a wee bit extra space on your hard drive if you want to download all these, but they're quite good fun just to play with and have a bit of a tinker around. Also, I mean, one of the tricks about this is, I mean, Ableton's version of this is actually rotated like 90 degrees around, so they have like channel strips going downwards, but it makes more sense in the Logic one where they just go across and you can switch between the two windows and it kind of just progresses. And you can either play it in here on these little blocks or you can play it along a track, right? So it kind of is a little bit simpler in a lot of ways. The other thing you can be doing is if you're creating music, you can basically be just recording in loops and creating little modules and then put your arrangement together after that and then just play over the whole top, I guess, if you really wanted to do that. I've also, part of the setup with Ableton is it's designed to be used as a live instrument, so everything is very easy to kind of automate and trigger on the go. So if you're feeling like I'm going to keep this bit going for another 8 bars, you can do that really easily just by when you trigger it. And it's the same in here really, like you can, down the bottom here, you can see these things are scenes, so everything up on this line will play if I play that little scene clip. Or I can play an individual beat or sound by clicking on it and clicking again to stop. And yeah, so if I play this, yeah, it plays the whole scene, and you can trigger it. You can pretty easily map it to buttons on your keyboard if you have one. I have. Just checking it actually still worked. So I've just got my Novation keyboard here, and it's got like buttons for Africa, really. And you can basically just go, you just select a scene, and you can go up to Control Surfaces, and you can go Learn Assignment. The last one I pressed was a Stop All Cells, actually. That's why it's saying this here. So basically the last thing that you press, if I trigger this, I'll just turn that down so I can talk over it. Then I go back into Control Surfaces, Learn Assignment. I change volume too. Every time I do something, it remembers that. So I'm going to click this, Control Surface, Learn Assignment for Live Loop Scene. And what I can do is just tap a button on my keyboard, and I've already done this for 8 scenes because I've got kind of 8 buttons along the top row. And you can go and have a look in there actually. These are the ones I've already learned. And by the way, if you need to go in there and like clear stuff, you can basically just select down there and hit delete. So this is the expert view in the automation setup. In the control surface setup. But it's kind of handy. So now I can just tap other buttons and it'll switch through to the different scenes. The beauty of these kind of the clip way of working, or the live loops as Logic calls it, is that you can quantize the start and end points of anything too. So it can always beat matches whatever you're doing. You can actually turn that off though for any given cell. So you can see for any cell that you click up here, you've got like in the little inspector window, you can say what do you want it to do. You can have it so it actually just plays it for the length of time I'm holding down the button on the keyboard. Where does it play from? All that kind of stuff. Does it actually loop? If you turn this off, it won't loop. It'll just play once. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do, which is actually pretty cool. And you can actually just record straight into them. So it has all the same features as if you're just recording on a track in Logic. So you can kind of record in there and do your, even if you do vocals, you could do your take folder within there. And anything you click on, so in one of these, if I record it into there, you can just double click on it and it will open up in the respective editor that you want. So I'll click on one of these instead. If I can get to it, where's one that's got MIDI? Most of these demo ones seem to be audio loops. This one is obviously like one of the new sequencer loops. So you can just go in there and edit it. And vice versa, you can just drag and drop anything in there to loop it. So it's a good way of kind of thinking about your arrangement structures and being creative. And I think even if you're not used to using this way of writing, it's a good way of kind of refreshing your writing techniques. And that's kind of where I'm heading with this, is like if you're trying to be creative and come up with some new ideas that don't sound like every other idea that you've had, it's quite a good way of kind of snapping out of that kind of system and thinking about sort of a new way of approaching it, or playing new chords, or coming up with new arrangements. It's kind of funny because one of the other things that I've found with what I've been doing lately is not only having to learn Ableton, but also I'm teaching house music, which is not really my preferred genre, to be honest, but I have developed a certain respect for it, let's say, recently. So it's been quite interesting in that you've got to come up with kind of interesting chord progressions that are not cliched, I guess, is a way of looking at it. So it's made me think about how to generate chord progressions within your DAW, whatever it actually is. In this case, it's Logic. Actually, I'm just going to save this. Always save as at the beginning. Zed demo 1 billion, because that's what it feels like. So I'm just going to save that. Demo 1 billion. Check that I got my sound happening. Good old classic electric piano. So probably I've shown you this before, but one of the first things you can do, obviously, in Logic is that if you're getting bored with the chord progressions and you're always playing the same chords like I am, it's kind of cool using things like Chord Trigger. And so I've just inserted this in there into my default one already. But if you can't find that, you can just click on your little MIDI slot there and you can put in Chord Trigger. And it's basically is programmed a chord for each note. These are just the default ones. You can see it's the factory default. If you click in here, you can have a look and see that you've got different voicings, bar chords. Pretty much I wrote the entire song Half-Life around progression in here, because you hadn't, if you listen to my stuff. There's some quite good ones. It's good for learning as well too, because you can kind of look at sort of voicings and see what the patterns actually look like. When you play it, you can see. Yeah, you can do a single over the entire keyboard, or multi. You can split it, and that basically just kind of, so the left hand might be chords and it leaves the right hand just to do individual notes. The thing to be wary of when you do this, by the way, is that if I record this now, even though I'm hearing chords, you're only recording what you're playing, so you're just playing a single note. That can be a little bit of a hassle later on if you're trying to identify what chords you've actually recorded. So it's a bit of a pain. There's ways around it though, so that's one of the tricks I'm going to show you, is just how to capture those chords. One of the other things that's worth thinking about too is I ended up buying this product called Captain Chords. I don't know if you've heard of it. They're the mixed and key people who deal with all that kind of chordal stuff, and it's used a lot in dance music and stuff. So That's this one here. Where are we? Come here, Firefox. Yeah, this thing here. So basically it's just a plug-in that you can put in your DAW, and it generates chord patterns. The cool thing about it, and the reason it's so good for like doing dance music, is it's not only easy to kind of generate a progression, but it also kind of cuts up the notes of the chords, so you can get a rhythmic thing going on as well. I'll quickly show you that, because it's kind of handy if you're doing anything that's related to that sort of thing. So it actually comes up as a MIDI plugin. So if you go, actually you can use it as a MIDI or audio plugin, but I'll show you. I'm just going to put it in here. Mixed in key, Captain Chords. You can put in your whatever key you're actually writing in. By the way, this is the first thing you should really be paying attention to before you even start, is like, what is the actual key that you're working in? And maybe I'm just going to go G minor. So I'm putting Logic in G minor, but I'm also going to put this in G minor. Where are we? G minor. Go. And you can see it just starts off and it gives you a chord. When I press play in Logic, it will play this plugin as well. And it's not playing that now because it's not starting at the beginning. And then you can basically just add chords, and any of these things up here you can do. You can see, like, here's the key of G minor, and it tells you what the actual chords are. And you've got alternative versions of it as well, so you can do some kind of fancy ones. And you can add a bunch of chords in, and you can do recommended, and so yeah, it could be anything. I'm not even looking. It's probably horrible. Beautiful. So what was that? So that's 1, 3. Let's go 4 and 6. Yeah, and so what you can do then is you can then, and it tells you what the progression is. It's basically just got an array. You can click on this, and here's every combination of, you know, the chords and a few kind of variations of it, of that pattern, if you've got 4 chords. So you can actually just click on that, and we'll put in the 4 chords if you want. The other thing you can do is you can go in here and you can actually set like a rhythm. So let's go and find a 4 chord kind of rhythm. And it basically just, this helps when you get into that habit of always like doing the same length chords, which is super boring as well. So you can try some of these, and you can see it'll just change the rhythm or the length of each chord. Yeah, you can see the thing there, and that's the timing. And then the rhythm, you can either play it in, you can see it's got a record thing there, or you can go up here and go complex Europe. I'm guessing that's some kind of fancy EDM thing. And you can see there it's just cutting it up. So yeah, just basically cuts it into a rhythm for you. And then once you got that, you can just drag that into a track, drag that little MIDI loop, and it gives you that loop, and then you can disable this if you want it. So that's one of the things I like about it. It's just like super, super simple, but of course you have to pay for it, so that's the downside. If you want to do the same sort of thing within Logic, we can do it with our chord memorizer, which is a little bit more basic, because you're really just kind of like, you can program your own chords in, by the way. So you can go in here and you can press a note, go learn, and then play in your chord, and then do another note, go learn, and so you can program your own chords in if you want, or you can just use one of these presets. So that's not too bad, but it just means that it's really just playing kind of the same pattern over and over again, which might be all you need. The other thing is it doesn't necessarily mean that it's fixed to the right key. So sometimes you get kind of odd chords that come out that don't suit the key that you're in. So this has got nothing to do really with the fact that we're in G minor. So what we can do though is to kind of force that is go MIDI and go Transposer. And the beauty of Transposer is that you can actually kind of set a key. Oh, can't go wrong. So you can basically kind of go in here actually and go, okay, what am I going to be? G minor or G minor pentatonic, whatever you want, or natural minor. Let's just go natural minor. And so now anything that comes out of this chord trigger will then go through the transposer, and the transposer won't let you play a note that doesn't fit G natural minor anymore. And you can also transpose here as well, hence it's called Transposer. But yeah, so you can actually sort of, it's quite good for like, is that the right key? Or is this the right key? Or is this the right key? So you can kind of like juggle it to get the combination of, you know, chords sound different in every key, you know, with the way that the fifth is, you know, closer to what it should be versus being moved into equal temperament. So yeah, sometimes just moving this around to find a different key can be kind of a cool way of working. And so now if we're going, I'm just going to record this. It's too slow. Why is it 80 BPM? I don't like it. I'm going to go up to like 120. Yeah. This is the house tempo. 120 to 130 BPM. So I'm just going to... That's all I'm doing. It's like the least I can kind of get away with. It's got a progression. So I'm just going to go... I'll quantize that. Because my playing is 8. Don't give me that. So you can see if we double click on this, have a look inside, it is quantized. It is a single line, so we don't know what those chords actually are. So here's the problem. It's like the next step is you're probably going to be generating some other chords that you want to play some other instruments with, and possibly kind of extract a bass line out of it. I mean, we could use this as a bass line, and you know, if I was doing house music or something, maybe that would be enough. I could just like switch that to an 808 kind of bass and have it sort of follow the root note. But that's kind of boring. So the best way is to actually be able to kind of pick and choose between your notes for your bass line if you're going to be doing that. So let's turn this into some chords, and the easiest way to do that is to actually just use the arpeggiator and extract it. You can see it's got a little thing here, so when I hit play, these things light up, and that's the actual output. That's the output of the arpeggiator, and this is the input to the arpeggiator, which happens to be that transposer. So it's kind of everything before this. So if I'm quick enough, and I'm just going to create a new track, new software instrument track down here, which is another piano. And when I hit play, I can grab that chord. So this is where I actually probably do want to slow it down and probably just... It's almost easier to do this and actually just play it live and capture each... once you know what you're actually playing as far as the progression, I can just hold down that note on here on this track and then capture that while I'm holding it. So that's a little bit easier, but if you've already recorded it like this, what we can do is, I just mute that because I don't need to hear it. So I'm just looping around each of these chords. Just capture that. Next one. I think these first two are the same. What I'm also going to do here, just so you can see if I want to match this, the length of this, I'm going to hold down Option. I'm just going to time stretch these because it saves me mucking around with the actual length of the MIDI notes. This will actually shorten the MIDI notes inside these while I'm stretching it. So it's a little bit of a trick. And then I've got this one. I'm going to Option drag that because that's the same. I'm going to Option drag that because that's the same, and this last one is different, I think. I went to an alternate note. Yep, so I'll grab that. Yeah, so that there is kind of a boring, horrible, tedious workaround, but it works. And so now, in theory, this is giving me the same chords. It's flipping loud. Yep, and I'm just going to glue those together, join. So now I've got my same. So this here has got the note, and this has got my chords. So that's kind of handy. Gives me a progression, or you can leave those chords cut up if you want to kind of rearrange them and do some other stuff with. And yeah, that's kind of the first step that I wanted to show you as far as like getting some progressions in there. And I think even just this trick with the chord trigger and the transposer is a good one in itself for just coming up with progressions and hopefully stuff that's a little bit different to what you'd normally do. I just saw something else I wanted to show you as well before I forget about it is, and why you should be really careful about setting a key signature for your song is if you're actually using things like loops, Apple loops, and I'm just going to go, I don't know, synths. Let's go to, I just want to go to regular kind of software instrument loops. Just clicking the little filter button on the corner there. So I just want something like, yeah, don't want oh, classic. Anyway, yeah. Actually, I want one that's a little bit longer just to sort of show you this. So let's go. Yeah, I'm just dragging it down to the blank spot to create a track, and I'll loop around that. But I just want to show you that something that you may not have used much, and I hardly ever use, but it's good knowing it's there, which is the transposition global track. So this thing works on MIDI and audio if you've got, and under audio if you've got the flex and follow turned on. It should be able to follow it. But basically what you can do is, if I just get my pencil tool, where are you? Pencil tool. And you can basically just kind of change the transposition. You can see actually they've changed logic so you can see that it's actually moved where it is in the pattern. So just, yeah, make it a bit more obvious. So it's basically just saying that you can do this with either existing MIDI regions or Apple loops if you're just trying to construct something and you've got sort of, quite often with these Apple loops when you're trying to sketch something out to get some ideas, some of them have progressions in them already and you're like, it's going to a chord that you don't want, so you can actually just go in there and create, you know, a change just for that one little bit in the loop that puts it in a different place. So it kind of works. Anyway, I just thought I'd remind everyone that that exists. And then you can actually kind of render it down afterwards if you want to make sure that no weird stuff is happening later on. It doesn't happen. Okay, here's a rule with it though. So if you've got an existing MIDI region and you make changes to the transposition global track, it will change it. But if you record something over that change, you know, MIDI-wise, it won't follow it. It'll just capture what you've actually done. So it's kind of like only does it after you've recorded it. Anyway, if you get that, there's ways around that. There's always ways around everything, obviously. So yeah, so chord progressions. By the way, if you are trying to work out chords in Logic, they've made it a little bit simpler lately. I'm just going to close this little automation drop down here. You can select a bunch of notes, and this has always been in here anyway. It tells you what this actually is, what the chord is. But it's kind of cool now. The first thing is that Logic will tell you, it'll estimate a chord based on only 2 notes now, which it before you had to have a tritone. You had to have 3 notes to actually, well, officially you do need 3 notes to define a chord, but now it will make a pretty good guess based on your key and what notes you've actually selected. The other thing is you can do it, you don't have to have them all in a line. It used to be you'd have to kind of quantize and snap everything to a bar to try and get them in a line so that you could actually kind of see what the chord was. But with this now, you can actually just select random notes across your piano roll, and it will tell you what that chord is that's being created with those. It just makes it a little bit easier when you're trying to work out, if you've already recorded something, you're like, well, what key am I in? What are these chords? And you can kind of work it out by selecting them. It gives you a bit better idea. And with now we've got this chord, it's a little bit easier also to kind of generate a bass line, because we can see now which potential notes that we will have. And just a reminder too that there's also the scale quantize that we can use to do it from the other side, which is, we can actually kind of select notes. It won't do anything because I have nothing selected, but I could actually select everything in here and change the key of it. Command A. To a different, I could sort of go, I actually want to make it major instead, major pentatonic, and now it'll change that. Ooh, get back there. Oh, it's made, those chords, last chords sound a bit more the same. But yeah, so you can kind of see, you can muck around with that, just more ideas for generating chords that you don't normally do, or if you have trouble actually just coming up with chord progressions. That's the other reason I like that Captain Chords thing, is it's just, I've got a textbook that's got a whole bunch of kind of typical chord progressions and some of the most common ones that are used. But it's a real pain in the ass to go and have to look that up to figure out, what sort of chord progression you want to use, or you can go and like look up famous chords online of, songs that are already out there that have done well, and, the standard ones. But the Captain Chords, it's sort of got them in there, and you can just sort of go, it's just that, and it's just super easy. So, yep, hopefully that's given you some insights as to some of the stuff that you can do in Logic as far as chords go. And by the way, if you're doing this kind of thing with the channel strip, with the chord trigger and the transposer at the same time, go ahead and save that as your default, or so I can actually click on here, my channel strip, and give it a name. So let's go channel strip setting, and I'm just going to call this Zed Chords or something. And save that as a preset, and you can in the library go and set that as your default somewhere in here. Save. Yep, it's not doing it. I think it's down here. Yeah, define as default. So it's under the little sprocket at the bottom there. So yeah, you can, it's kind of handy. You can do that kind of thing. And so every time you kind of create a new MIDI track, track, software instrument track. Yeah, there we go. It's got all those things in it. It's super loud again. One of the other things I do is I have a velocity compressor in there. It's basically just the velocity plug-in, and it just turns it up a little bit so I'm not hammering on my keyboard to get some sound out of it. So yeah. And yeah, so that was mostly what I was going to show you. The other thing was probably just I just want to show you a couple of tricks in like if I create a MIDI region, and just the brush tool, which I know we've looked at before in previous things, but I just wanted to remind people about how useful that is. So if you go to your brush tool plugin, that's also a handy thing to use if you put scale quantize on. You can pretty much play something in and it will force itself to stay to that scale. So that's another good way of kind of generating, if you're like, I don't know what notes are in that scale, just turn on the scale that you want to use and put a bunch of notes in, and that gives you like a template that you can use to generate stuff for that. One other thing I'll show you while I'm in here as well, It's probably not the best sound to have this on. It's kind of a analog bass. But what we can do is, if I select all these, I'm just like right mouse clicking to select all. Then I'm going to control click on one of these and define brush pattern. And that gives you, now when I use the brush, it's going to give me the entire pattern. The funny thing is, it's a giant mess of notes, but all of them are in key, so it actually kind of works. Yeah, so I'm just like painting in some pixels. It needs like a, yeah, it needs that. Save. Yeah, it's pretty busy. But anyway, the brush, this kind of brush pattern thing is really handy for well, drums. I think is what it was originally done for. So you can make up a drum pattern, and you can, you know, obviously define that as your drum pattern, and then you can just kind of copy parts of it in, because obviously it just draws out as long as you drag that particular part. But it's also really good for orchestral stuff, where you want to do, you can basically put in an orchestral line, and now you can actually draw that in as like a harmony, or as in another part of it in another instrument. So it's really good for that kind of stuff as well. You can see up here I control clicked again, and I can get the reset brush pattern, which will get rid of that if I want, and then I can redefine something else. But yeah, and by the way, it's actually the Quantize that sets the length of notes in there. Yeah, and you can see, actually one of the other cool things about this is, if I'm still holding the mouse down, I can just back up the Venga bus, and it just undoes it, and it also switches to the eraser tool automatically. So that brush tool is actually super cool, to be honest, and probably should use it more. And like I say, great for like drum patterns, because I can actually just go new software instrument track with my new defaults on it. But I'm just going to go to electronic drum kit 808. Yeah, 808. Create a new pattern, go into it. I love this new feature in the latest Logic update, which now names the actual things. Get back there. Oh. Hey. Don't know why it's doing that. I correct myself up. Yeah. So anyway, it's just sounding. It's just mayhem, really. Yep. Cool stuff. Just another little thing that's good to know, that I kind of relearned from doing dance music, is in this last couple of months, is that you can go, if you hold down the command key in the note velocity editor at the bottom here, and you can drag a line, and that will give you, hey, cut that out. It's doing freaky stuff on me. Don't know why it's doing that. And you can do, yeah, weird, I don't know. It's just not doing what, who knows? I don't know what it's doing. But normally you can actually just do like a, that will set like a line on your velocities. But no, it doesn't want to do that. It's just demo-itis, you know. It's like every time I do something in here, weird things happen. And then later on I go, oh, it's because I didn't do this, or I didn't do that. So it's usually operator error, to be honest. Anyway, so hopefully you picked up a couple little things there. And finally, I just want to show you one other thing that's actually pretty good, and especially if you're doing stuff that's a little bit kind of dance-oriented. And I'm just going to go into my customized toolbar. I always leave this drop down here because there's some really good stuff in it. But I'm just going to like turn off some of this stuff. Articulation, share, join, bounce regions. So some of the stuff I don't need. It's just taking up room on my display because I'm in a lower resolution for presentation purposes. But what I want to show you was this, the note repeat and spot arrays thing. So this is a bit more kind of dance music oriented as well. And what this is basically, so if I hold down, if I'm doing drums, and for anyone that knows what trap music is, it's basically one of the things you can do is it's all this tricky hi-hat stuff. See, now I've opened this up. This has enabled it and also popped open this little note repeat thing. But what you can do is if you do the drop down, I can turn on modulation wheel, and when I hit my modulation wheel, I can do that kind of trap speed up on the hi-hat and record that. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. Or I can turn on if I've got an extra couple of octaves on my bottom of my keyboard, I can set all that stuff on particular notes while I'm playing. So you can do it as like a live thing or just for recording. But I'm just going to do it with modulation wheel. So if I just hit record, crazy. So anyway, you can see that's basically recorded that hi-hat thing. So it's just a way of kind of putting stuff in and changing the speed of it. And remember, like a lot of these things that you kind of go, okay, it's really, a lot of people write off this sort of stuff because it feels like it's just designed for electronic music. But you've got to remember they're all just tools that you can use, and that if you remember them, there's times when you go, I need to record this thing. I want to do this bass line that just increases in speed. And there's two ways you can do it. One way is to go in there and start editing your MIDI and just make it faster and faster and spend like 15 minutes on it. Or you can just go in there, dial this up, play the thing, and then just put up the modulation wheel and record it. And so you've kind of got the same thing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on drums. This is just a tool for changing the speed of notes, repeating them and changing the speed of them. Super easy. So those kind of things it's good to know about, regardless of what genre of music that you're actually creating. The other thing too is this spot arrays is a way of erasing notes by holding them down while you're recording. So if I go in here and go, so I just played that same hi-hat note, and you can see it's just deleted while I'm holding that note down. So it's a way of kind of like clearing stuff out. It's, yeah, like I say, it's something you can be doing as like a live performance where you're building things and breaking them down and stuff like that, or just for kind of recording purposes. So there we go. Yeah, and so that's almost it. I just want to show one more thing. There's just one more thing, and that is while we're on the modulation wheel, I just want to like show you. Oops, spot arrays, get out of there. Okay, toggle that. It's really hard to get out of spot arrays mode. I just want to show you that automation quick access, just in case you've forgotten about this. And because the modulation wheel is the perfect thing for your automation quick access. So if I click on automation quick access, it's probably already set to this, or maybe not. Okay, I'm going to go into my control surfaces and go to... I'm just going to clear everything. There's my automation quick access here. You can see it. I'm just going to delete this. And it should pop up a little thing. 8. Why? Okay, seems to be working now. I've just had to kind of do it manually. Of course, it's just going to be a pain, isn't it? I probably actually recorded something else into it. I'm just going to clear everything. Yeah, so some of the stuff is automatically in there because I've used, I'll show you this. I'm just going to go set up. It's because I've used an iPad to as a control surface. So if you just plug in, if you use like your Logic Remote on your phone or your iPad. That comes up as a control surface. I'm just going to delete it. It just puts it back in again. I've also got obviously my Novation is coming up as a control surface as well. I don't really want to delete that, but we'll see. Anyway, automation access is not yet defined, so now I've reset it. It's saying please assign it. Okay. So do you want this to assign this controller now? Yes, thank you. And then I'll wobble my modulation wheel. Then I click done. And then that should be working. Yeah. But of course, it's not. Oh, it is now. Okay, so weird. I think it's just getting confused as between my Novation as a control surface, because it has a whole bunch of predefined things that just happen magically, and just manual override. So I've just learned this is like a separate kind of automation thing that's like a standalone, and it's sort of global, and it just works on pretty much everything. So automation quick access is on. I learned the message. You've got to hit done when you're finished, otherwise it keeps waiting for you to move something. But now, I don't know if you can see this, but now when I move the modulation wheel, it's moving my volume up and down. And if I change this to pan, yeah, absolute, it's making my pan go. So basically anything you want to automate, and that can be anything at all. So it can be a plugin, it can be whatever you're automating on this. So if I go into like touch mode, and just turn this down because it's just chaos. So I can basically kind of click on something and just wriggle it so it sets that as what I'm working on in automation, and now I can use my modulation wheel to actually program it. So it's just like, it's such a smooth way of doing it, and musical. So when you're using a control surface or a knob or, a modulation wheel to actually change something that you're automating, it's way smoother and way easier to do. Now, the one last thing that I'll point out, and by the way, this will switch to whatever you've actually selected or you're automating at that time. So you can see now I'm moving my modulation wheel and it's moving this knob here. But if I go back to volume, now it's doing my volume level. So basically it'll just switch. If you want to switch this back to modulation again, the little aqua button up here, if you click that, it toggles off, and now it's just gone back to being modulation. I can see it up here on my MIDI in moving. So yeah, so basically, yeah, it's just a real handy thing to do. So if you've got a MIDI keyboard sitting there in front of you while you're working on your music, use that modulation wheel for all your kind of automation purposes. It's damn handy. Anyway, that's all I'm going to talk about today. Hopefully that's given you a whole bunch of ideas, and hopefully we'll catch you next time. It's lovely having you along, so catch you later. Thanks to all my supporters, by the way. Really appreciate all your help. It's got me through some tough times, so catch you later.